be able to do it here on the slides.
Okay. Yes. Thank you again for having each of us today. I want to start by saying that Rockcastle County Schools is not an L3 district. This community-based accountability model that we have established came about as part of a natural progression out of the strategic planning work that we did in our community. We started that work in 2021, and this is just the next step of part of that work. So what does community-based accountability mean for Rockcastle County Schools? It means total community buy-in. In Rockcastle County Schools, we created a pillar system that was born out of our strategic plan, in which we have 7 pillars. We have a chair of each pillar, and each pillar team is composed of community members, students, teachers, parents. It is the voice of all of our stakeholders. And we really began this whole process because we feel as a school district that we're accountable to our community. So if our system is not developed with our community's wishes in mind, then we're not a successful school district. So we brought all of these individuals together, and you can see in the picture, this was our first meeting, and we invited 70 people to participate at that first meeting, and 68 of them showed up. So to me, that showed our community is bought into this system, and they want a voice into what their school system looks like. So we just basically started with the question is, what do you want from Rockcastle County Schools? What is your vision for us? And out of that work, we've held multiple meetings, and we've developed key questions. We've developed a signaling process, which is basically how are we measuring our success? You know, it's fine to say we're going to do all of these things, but how are we measuring our actions? We have an action plan developed. We have signaling meetings. We're providing our community a summary of our events, and it's extremely transparent. We are not claiming that we're perfect in all of these 7 pillars. If we were, there would be not a necessity to be doing this work. However, this is the work of our community. This is not our district leadership team. This is not superintendent work. This is not principal work. This is our community asking and us trying to deliver on what that they would like to see in our district. And I would like to say this is very much more than reading and math. Everyone agrees that is vitally important for student development. However, we're looking at so much more. We're looking at student achievement, student readiness, which involves the portrait of a learner work that we have already discussed today. But we're looking at so much more. We're looking at our transportation. We're looking at our operations involving technology. We're looking at our food service department. Family and community engagement, that is vital of getting our community and our families involved in our school system. So how are we doing in those areas? Student safety, well-being, student support, professional learning, we are tackling all of that in this pillar system. So I wanted to share with you, out of that work, the conversations that have taken place in those meetings have been phenomenal, because it is truly listening and us changing our practices to make sure we're meeting the needs of our community. But here's some questions that have been posed by our stakeholders. How do we better innovate to meet the needs of habitually truant students? I mean, that's the conversation that is repetitive in our system. How do we better innovate to meet the needs of chronically disruptive students? What are we doing to meet those needs? Students that are experiencing mental health needs, how are we serving those students? And then our students that are on the college track and need academic acceleration, what are we doing? So we're trying to tackle all of those questions and create a system that can meet the needs of each student. So what is the answer? It's very complicated, but we feel, the 3 of us feel like the hope is here. We are the hope. We are the ones that need to work together to problem solve and create a system that we can all be proud of. So I want to tell you, I know we're short on time, I want to tell you a really short story of a student. I had a student that enrolled with me as a sophomore that had been bounced from foster home to foster home throughout her life, lots of trauma involved, and she enrolled with us. The last school enrollment, she had been expelled because she had attacked an SRO. So a chronically disruptive student, she comes to us, very, very few credits, She's with us just a few days, and we've had to suspend her as well for disruption issues. The student did enroll with a child, a new baby, so she was a new mother, and tragically, the baby's father was this child's foster parent. So lots and lots of trauma. So she's here. We've already suspended her. She and the foster mother come in my office and they sit down and they just need help. You know, this child cannot be successful in a traditional high school setting, going from 8 to 3, changing classes. It's not a setting that she can be successful in. We enrolled her in our alternative school. This was 2 years later in May. She spoke at our board meeting and spoke about, just thank you for this opportunity. You have saved my life. So what did we do? We innovated is what we did. We placed this child in an alternative setting. We provided one-on-one counseling, group counseling, wraparound services. Some days that student did not come to school till 10 o'clock. Some days that student didn't come to school at all. And to be honest, some days that student did come to school and the baby came to school with her. But through the technology advances we have, through virtual learning, this student progressed. She had credit recovery, she got caught up, and she graduated. She's now enrolled in a community college. So that's a great success story, but that needs to be the norm. We need to have those capabilities to meet the needs of all of our students in a very innovative and creative way. So what do we propose? We have to lead with high expectations, we know that, but we really need to explore the possibility of expanding our alternative education model. What does that look like for serving students that are habitually truant, students struggling with emotional regulation, students who are chronically disruptive, students with mental health needs? How can we better serve them through an innovative model? So as I visualize what my community has asked for and what my students need, this is what I see. I see we need to offer a choice where we can provide students a therapeutic session where they can have intensive day treatment and a clinical model balancing and partnering with education where we can provide wraparound services. We can focus on those core reasons why students are truant. We all know most students want to be in school. There are outside factors that are playing into this truancy issue that we're all seeing. Let's focus on counseling, mental health supports, skill development. How do we write a resume? How do we go for a job interview? All of these skills that are going to help students be successful. And then having clinical and academic partnerships. So you have heard a lot today from us. You've heard a lot about community-based accountability. You've heard a lot about truancy from multiple presenters. So next steps. What are we asking for? What do we see that would be a bright future for Kentucky education? And we're asking for a task force to study these areas that we've spoken about today. Community-based accountability model, born out of being responsive to the needs of our community, competency-based or performance-based models, and then let's look at an alternative education model so we can serve every student in our community. And before I close, I just want you to draw attention to this picture in this slide. Had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to go to Asbury University and speak to our future educators in the state. And this is a group of students at a roundtable discussion. And if you could have just been a fly on the wall and heard the discussions that these students have about what they want for their communities and what they want out of their schools, it's truly amazing, and oftentimes the answers are right in front of us if we just talk to our students. So, you want to close out?
Well, we'll just close there and take questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I apologize once again. We could have taken the whole meeting on just this topic, but this is the Education Committee. We're just going to do 2 questions on this segment here. Representative Massaroni.
Thank you, Chair. You know, when I go to a restaurant, I look at the score when you go in. If it's an F, I'm not going in that restaurant. When I decided what public school to send my daughter to, she is a public school kid, I looked at the scores. I looked at the math, reading, yeah. And that's how I chose which school to send my daughter to. What I am hearing is we're not really going to be looking at those as much. You know, there's extracurricular activities. If I want to personalize my daughter's experience, I can put her in those. I can put her in different clubs. I can put her in after-school church activities, whatever. What I'm kind of hearing is you want to move away from those core math, reading, and writing. And right now in our Kentucky kids, we just got the scores. They're not where they need to be. Is that...
Well, I'll let them respond, but I'll just say first, we think those are important, but we know there's a lot more to that education picture. And so when you think about accountability, we have federal and we have state. Those things ought to be fairly stable, right? They shouldn't change much over time because we know those big overarching goals, and we're not asking to take those away, but we're saying there's some real estate in the accountability space where you ought to look at that local picture that they described and add that to the school report card, for example, and so that parents can also see these things.
Well, really quick, Chair. Right now, our kids are not proficient. A majority of them are not proficient at reading, writing, and math. We're kind of, the way I see it, we're jumping ahead of ourselves. Let's concentrate on those things because that's the biggest indicator of success. If our kids can't read, if they can't write, and they can't comprehend, they're not going to be successful.
And we agree with you on that. We just think there's some formative ways to show that progression. It may be more useful to parents, but we know for certain they're more useful to students in deciding what they need to do next in their learning, and really more useful for teachers in designing instruction.
Representative Bojanowski, you'll be the last question this segment. If you can keep it tight for us, please.
All right, I'll keep it tight. Could I'm so sorry, Dr. Kreisman, could you speak on the readiness for learning measure in your accountability model?
Yeah, sure. So you up until this year, we used MAP. This year, we switched to iReady. We can also look at, over a course of time, if a student is progressing in reading or math, and we report that out. And we also use the state assessment model to also look at that. But one thing that we're doing differently, though, is we're also, through our personalization component, looking at really what that student can do in terms of reading, math, and writing, because those should be performance tasks that people can look at, not just remember or recall, but actually can do. So we utilize that personalization through our Portrait of a Graduate to really showcase that. But you're not going to get me to argue that reading, math, and writing is not important, and we should not report that out, and we do. But we also report it out in our local accountability model as well, and we've been doing that for 3 years, more transparently than what the traditional accountability model does. And I go back to Representative McCool. We've had a great conversation months back. If you look at our senior welders, which, by the way, we've got the best welding program in the state, I just had to throw that out there, they probably did not pass a reading state assessment. However, if you look, they just read the OSHA 10 manual with a Lexile of 1300, and they walked out with OSHA certification. So I'm not trying to muddy the waters here. Remember what I said, it's not anti-testing, it's testing better, down to the personal student level, trying to truly understand what that particular student can do. Some students are going to do well on an ACT. I'm an average Joe. I would tell you I would not pass the ACT or a KSA today, and I've got a doctorate. This is, but if you give me a history exam, I could probably pass it. I like reading about history. But those students in welding, they're walking out making more than teachers, and they've got an OSHA certification, but KSA is saying that they can't read. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to say these kids should not read, write, or do math.